Welcome to the Dev Ready podcast, where we're helping non-techs build better tech. Today we have Zach Kohler joining us from Kohler Business Solutions. Zach, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's always good to have a bit of a chat to someone that's in business, talking about business growth today. So it'll be a good conversation to have with you.
Yeah, definitely going to be interesting.
Definitely. We'll see how it goes. We're doing this on video, so everyone knows. So it'll be a video because we want to share a couple of things, but we'll attempt to keep it audio too so people can follow along. But let's see how we track. Zach, before we jump into that, tell us a bit about you, yourself, your business experience, and what business growth means to you and what you basically will consider in terms of business growth and helping businesses grow.
Yeah. So I started in... I've always been interested in business as a young kid. My like thing when I was growing up was like I wanted to have 1 million acres of property. I used to be like cattle farming and things like that.
Just 1 million.
Just 1 million. Yeah. I didn't. Yeah. I realized later on how much that really is, and then I don't. That's a really unnecessary amount to have.
It's a lot
but
of
it sounded
acres,
like a good round. Yeah, sounded like a good round number when I was a kid. But I really. I've always loved business. I actually started off focusing on investing first. So my parents have always been in business. And actually, as I was growing up, they started a business. They had that business for about a decade. And they worked incredibly hard in that business. Like they had like no days off. It was like, the quintessential small business where there was my parents and they just like, it just took off and they started growing in with the mining boom in our local town. And that's sort of my first insight into business and seeing how hard it is and seeing like the effort that goes into it. But the thing that like got me started in it is that it was really investing. So I was earning a little bit of money. I was working as a ringer when I first got out of school. And if people don't know, working on a properties, you don't earn a lot of money. So it was like about $100 a day, like before tax. So you didn't end up with a lot at the end of the month, but over time, I ended up growing that, ended up turning into quite a large amount of money by the time I was around 20. So I ended up turning like about a $50,000 a year wage into, I had about probably close to 500K in the bank over those few years. But unfortunately...
I'd to talk to you about investments.
I invested. I mean, obviously not investment advisor. You always have to put that big like disclaimer, like, "Hey, I could have got super bloody lucky, and this is probably might not be replicatable." As something I think a lot of people don't understand is that you can make a lot of money in a couple of years, but if you're 1 year from retirement and you lose everything, you're starting from scratch again. People don't take that.
You don't want to be there, right?
The risk. Yeah, they take that risk profile in when they think about, I'm doubling my money on Bitcoin every year. So they have to think about the longer term. But then when I got into business, really through a pretty tragic event, my mum passed away, and she was the.
Sorry to hear that.
No, that's okay. She was like the. She was like the bit. She really was the sort of glue that held everything together. Like my father is really like the doer. Like we had a machinery business and a cattle station. He was the one that would like drive the machines. Do you know what I mean? And he would be the one like to farm the cattle and do those things. But my mum was the business behind it. Like she was the everything. She was the customer service person. She was dealt with the bank. She dealt with all of this. And so it's sort of like a whole heap of things happened at once where my mum passed away. The local economy in our town went from a population of around 25,000 down to 5,000. It just literally crashed. It was like went through the floor. Every time you thought you hit a blow, it went to another low. The cattle, we had a drought at that stage. So the cattle property wasn't doing great. So when I took over after my mum passed away, our businesses that we had about 10 million in debt and we were losing $1 million a year. It was it was like mega bad. And it was a couple of months after my mum passed away, the banks come to me and said, "Hey, we're closing you down. You've got 2 months left." Like it was like I'm almost shaking right now. Like it was it was incredibly difficult because obviously like I was incredibly naive to business at that point. You know what I mean? Even though I'd done well with investing, business is a different beast altogether.
Different
and you got
sport,
so many.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like you don't understand. Like people, like I invest, I put money into the market, and I do my my research on it, whether I think it's a good or bad deal. But I didn't have to worry about management. I didn't have to worry about staff quitting on me or people do it. Like I don't worry about suppliers not paying. Like there's all these things that happened, and so when I heard that, like it was like a bit of a shock to the system, and it was like the decision I had to make was, do I like what do I do, right? Because my parents had worked like their entire lives for what they have, like they for all the assets that they had, like they were spent 10 years where they would work at Christmas, they would work at Easter, like people think, oh, they worked every day of the year. Like, yeah, no, they worked every day of the year until like midnight. Like they just put their whole heart and soul into doing this. And now I heard that some random bank person's going to take this from my family and to take everything, and we're literally going to be with nothing and potentially still be in debt after they take it all. And so,
yeah, massive thing.
Yeah.
How old were you at this time?
I was about 20, like 19, 20
Wow.
at that stage.
All right,
Yeah,
just
so a lot to
thrown
take
right
on.
into it. I still remember I was sitting at uni drinking coffees, skipping classes at about 20, mate. So yeah, going through that would have been pretty full on at that age. Yeah.
Yeah, it sucked. And obviously my dad was not in the right space of mind. Like he's actually come a long way. He's but he went through some hard times there. Like we all like he was like 30 plus years married, and to lose it, and it was quite a shock, because it was it was pretty sudden. Like we didn't know she died of breast cancer, but she'd already fought breast cancer all through her life, and we thought they had it, and then they found it again, and it was already in a it wasn't anyway
Everywhere.
Yeah, too late. Yeah.
it was like it was like, oh, you got cancer, and then it's like, oh, you this is not good. Anyway, so then I took over that, and like I said, I just had to make the decision, like what do I do? And I just said, the bank said no, I'll find a way how to do this. And so what I did is I took all my savings that I had I just put it all into the business, and like that's not a lot when you're thinking you're losing that much money either. Like that evaporated, like pretty much just covering supplier payments for like a month. Like it was like, like, oh shit. Like what's gonna happen now? So anyway, long story short, I went through that, and I literally just worked my ass off for 4 years, and like it was sort of both, right? Because like it wasn't just working on making things like how do we make next month's payments. It was just like, how do we get through this month? How do we get through next month? It was also me having to learn business. Like it wasn't like I was going through the motions, which would be difficult enough going into a business like that, which if you're already business experienced. I had no idea what I was doing. I was talk about novice, and like I didn't understand anything. And so like I went in there, and I obviously ballsed up a lot of stuff. I had a lot of I had to learn management and leadership skills. I had to learn how to staff, because we had quite a large staff at that point. And then some of them, because I feel like the health issues, some of them probably weren't the right people in the right positions, if that makes sense. And they needed to go. So I had to go through and had to make some really hard calls, and learn how to sort of measure that and deal with the bank. And so it was really like 16-hour days every day. It was like 8 hours of how do I get through this month, and 8 hours of what the hell am I doing? Reading books, YouTube, like look anything I can find to be like, how the hell do I do this business thing, and just get through it. And that was like 4 months. And so 4 years down the road after that, completely debt free, and where our businesses are like making close to a bit over $500,000 a year on the family side of things. So we've completely turned around. We've paid off all of our debts, and our businesses are in a really, really good shape.
It's a phenomenal turnaround in terms of that, right? What has that taught you about what you're capable of? I think as a 20-year-old being thrown into that, you can choose to curl up and do nothing about that because it's just too hard, and put it into that basket, or you can dig in, and what you did was dig in. And do you think the being put in that position forced you to dig in more than you would have if you just started a business from scratch? Do you think that challenge, that you were back against the wall, sort of gave you that sort of fight to say, all right, I nearly need to dig in, I need to do the long hours, I need to push really, really hard here, and just dig right in and get an understanding of what this is all about? You said 8 hours of learning, 8 hours of business. Do you think the circumstances created the willpower and the drive within you?
I think I already had that before, but I think what I did is like it was like a pressure cooker. It accelerated the process, if that makes sense. Because like most people, like there's like a thing I see a lot of times where people like say they want to start a business, they want to do something. They spend like they focus on really dumb things that aren't really getting results. But when you're like, oh, I have to pay suppliers in 3 weeks and I need to find 200K, like that's like focuses your mind really effectively on how do I get this result, right? Like I need to learn how to do my business plan, like work out how to make a pretty graph to make this look good. Like, no, I need to like, how do I make this happen? And so it accelerated that accelerated my growth. But I feel like honestly, like I've always been like, I've always been a hard worker. I've always been a workaholic. Probably not even healthy. I've always had that, but it pressure cooked me into a way.
Where do you think that may have come from, Zach?
My parents certainly had there's some sort of genetic gene.
So I think
definitely.
I think environment plays a big part in everything in life. Being around that environment with parents working sounds like significantly hard would rub off on you. Either you suck it in or you revolt against it or rebel against it. So I think you've obviously gone down that same path. So it can get sort of built within us from our parents and handed down. It's interesting. Okay. Yeah. So we've gone through that process. You've actually turned a business around that was pretty much ready to go bankrupt. Hats off to you, because I think, that's something not many people can get through, and not even experienced people can get through that have been in business for a long time. They still would have been in a big challenge in that environment. Looking back at that experience, what's a couple of things you would take away from that? What's that taught you about business? If it was 3 things that you'd learnt, what would they be from that experience?
A couple of things. I think it's persistence. You know what comes to mind when you say that? Do you know the Stockdale paradox?
No, I never heard of no Stockdale paradox. No, I haven't.
So Stockdale paradox, it's I believe Jim Collins from he wrote a book called Good to Great. He coined it, and in that there was a Stockdale. And please forgive me, people listening, if I get the details wrong. Go and look up the video. But the premise of it is that Stockdale was the highest ranking prisoner of war. I believe it was in Vietnam. Okay. And he went through this process, and he come out and he said he had an unwavering faith that he was going to make it through, and he ended up coming out of it, completely fine, like mentally, and got through the process. And Jim Collins was listening to his story and asked him, it's like who doesn't make it out of these things? And he said the optimist doesn't make it out. Obviously, and that seemed like a bit of a paradox, because like you had unwavering faith you're going to make it out. Why would the optimist die? And the optimist would sit there and say, I'm going to be out by Christmas. I'm going to be out by Easter. And they would end up dying of a broken heart because they weren't in reality. They had this dream they were going to get through. And so what you have to learn to do is you have to learn to face reality and also have unwavering faith that you will prevail in the end. And that's what I feel like I had to do, is I had to be 100% reality. I couldn't have wished that I was going to win the lotto to pay my debts off, right? I had to face the 100% reality that shit is going to suck. People are going to get paid late. I have to be aware that, hey, I have to strategically choose which supplier I care about more than the other, because I don't have enough money to do it. I had to be in that reality, but I had to maintain that nonstop drive, that sort of certainty that in the end I was going to give up or going to prevail, or otherwise you give up, right? You don't have that faith. If you think that this is all going to end in flames and you're going to lose, and even though if that's statistically probably right, you still have to have that faith to continue going through, that you will somehow find a way to get through.
Yeah, no, I think that's a massive takeaway, because, it's all about faith in yourself and belief in yourself to do it. And I think if you don't have that, it's nigh impossible. Yeah, you might as well not start. And I think, that's the challenge. You need to believe in yourself, in your ability to find a way, because really when you walked into that, you had no way, no knowledge of way, but you believed in your ability to find a way, and that's enough sometimes to get you through. May not be enough to do it every single time, but it got you through, given what was the circumstances thrown at you. So it's a good takeaway. Yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah, it's statistical, right? Like the longer you do it and persist at it, the higher likelihood you achieve. There's no guarantees in life. Like people have to realize that, and they also have to realize that they don't.
On that though, you'd have to continuously be learning. If you do the same thing over and over again and don't do anything different, there's no chance it's going to change. And I think if you're constantly learning, evolving, growing, then yes, statistically you are going to have more chance of succeeding. So I think on that caveat though.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that just continually improves the likelihood of success. Like there's people out there that throw something against the wall and it works. They make an app and it's got low lifespans, but some reason someone pays $1 million for it and they feel like, oh, look how great I am. I'm so successful. And this poor person who's done everything they could in life to try to get ahead, and they continually get hit knocked down. But they've got to realize that like they might have done everything correctly. They got to learn those lessons, and they just got to get up and try again, right? Like that's the part I think people miss in business is they think there's some surefire way to success, and it's just not. And you got to be aware of that.
Yeah, and everyone's looking for a system or a process, and I think every business is different. And if you're really going to be in business and really succeed, you have to be unique in some way, some form. So you got to create your own path. There's no pick a book off the shelf and just copy and paste. It doesn't work in the environment. So yes, you have to be innovating, have to be something new, doing something new to offer more value to customers, consumers, whichever your target is, how you coin them. So yeah, it's a growth period. It's an innovation cycle. There's plenty in business. There's always new learning. There's always new things to jump into, sink your teeth into. And if you're not up for that challenge, it's probably not for you to be in business, to be honest.
Yeah. I think a lot of people think they're entitled to succeed. They want to. I mean, we see it all the time. People like, hey, I want to start a business. I have a full-time job.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, cool. And they're like, my ideal lifestyle is to work 3 days a week. And they're like, and they want to start there, right? They like, and I'm like, that's not how reality. It works. They're like, no, like, hell, this weekend I'm going away for a couple of weeks this week. And I worked until 4 a.m. on Sunday. Like you got to be aware that is your life if you decide to go into business. Like you can't expect to have your cake and eat it too. Like it doesn't work.
There are people out there that can get to that point, and I think that's a process. Yeah, I think it is a process, especially when you're starting out in a business and something new, something that you're looking to build. You have to find your way. You have to build your systems. You have to build your processes. You have to build your value. And until you do that, there's no walking out of a business and leaving it for 3 to 6 months. It just doesn't happen, especially if you're driving most of it. Yeah.
Nothing starts out on top.
No. Yeah. Not at all.
Exactly.
Yep. Yeah,
it's like a flywheel, right? Like there's like a thing like you got like you got a big tire, and you start like you're trying to get it to move, and at the first you try to push it, it's like super hard, and you get like 2 inches, and you're like, oh, this is so much worth it. But after like years and years of like pushing that thing, you can just like flick your hand and the thing like flies around. It's just like the same as business. It builds on momentum, and you can get to a point where your business is at a certain scale where you have a manager, you have your structure in place, and then you can walk out for 6 months and see how it goes, have all those systems in place, and then you could go on that holiday, do those things, come in, check in how it's going. It's when you want that more. If that person wants to grow that business 10 times, they probably still have to be in that business and working those times.
That's a fair point, yeah. Creating the system's one thing, but evolving and growing is another thing. Still needs to be driven.
Exactly.
Still needs someone at the wheel that's driving that. And generally that's the founder or the people on the top that are part of that business, especially from the early days, or real high management driving that. So depending on the level of business. So fair point there. All right, let's dig in. We want us to talk a bit about growth today, that's a bit about your background. How did Kohler first come about? Tell us a bit about that story and why Kohler exists before we jump into business growth.
Yeah, definitely. Kohler literally exists because as I was going through my business journey and even starting my own businesses and things like that, I found I couldn't find the solution that I was looking for. Like Kohler is literally the solution that I wanted for when I was growing in business. And way I started it was I wanted to create something that my parents could have used, or a small business could go to. Because I see all the mistakes that my parents made and how difficult it was, and it didn't have to be as hard as what they made it, or what it was end up with them, because they didn't quite understand business principles. A lot of people get into business knowing how to do a thing, but not quite understanding business. And so I wanted to create Kohler, so I can literally bring all the things that multi-billion-dollar internet companies do, and they spend $3 million on consulting for. I want to bring all these concepts and business concepts I learned over the years and put it into a system and help businesses with it. The way I like to think about it is like, if you think of like Mount Everest and the business owners at the bottom, and there's like the success or whatever they want is at the top, what I want to do is I want to pave that road for them. So I can't make them walk it. There's no helicopter rides to success, but I can make the process as easy as possible for them to get what they want and to have it as least painful. If people don't make the mistakes, they're going to have a lot more success as what they do.
Yeah, I think the mistakes can set you back. Mistakes just in our business. When you have a mistake, you can see it back 12 months, and you can be working just to get back to where you were 12 months ago, based on certain mistakes and what you may have been not focusing on, right? So
some of those mistakes you have to make, though, to learn.
You do, yeah. And then
even if the path is in front of you, you still need to know not to step off it.
Yeah, exactly. So,
100%. Yeah. There's an awesome book and a coin phrase from Keith Cunningham. It's called The Road Less Stupid.
Yeah, I love that
amazing book. I recommend
cracking book.
Crazy. And he's got like the stupid tax, right?
Yeah.
Like you think of all the mistakes you made and all the things that you could have done better.
Yeah.
Where would you be now? Do you know what I mean? Or even just economically, like if you make that one deal that you lose like 100K on, like, you know, what that could have accumulated over time and stuff like that. Yeah, it's scary to think about, but it's true. But again, you need those mistakes are the lessons, right? It's only if you learn them. If you don't learn them, then they're just wasted. You have to learn those lessons and not make them again.
Agree. So Kohler is all about helping that business owner sort of, or carve out a path for that business owner. Clearly, there's their own learning and there's their own growth period to go through, that you add on. So when we look at growth, so we're talking to a business, we're talking to non-techs that are building tech. Now, that's one of the things you said earlier. Businesses, or someone may get into business because they're great at doing something, or have a great idea, or they're a techie, and they can build the solution. Now, that's all well and good, but that's not business acumen. And I think you learn that when you start. So me and Anthony started business as two tech guys. I had a bit of a finance background. Yay back now, a little while back now. What was it, 2008? Yeah, feels like a lifetime ago. If I were to talk back to that person, I'd say, geez, maybe go get a bit more experience in business before you start. So, yeah, that would be my biggest learning from that perspective. But looking back to that person back then, we started out, we just wanted to build tech. We loved tech. We were interested in ideas. We wanted to explore that. We didn't really dig in and understand what marketing was, what selling was, what a process was, managing customers were. And we didn't really look at that. It was all about tech. So that is definitely, I agree, one of the biggest challenges when you're jumping into business, because you're either a doer and you've been in maybe in industry for a long while, and you jump into consulting. So you jump into a role that's doing, not building business. So how do you get people out of that mindset and into the mindset of business? Because they're two very different things. The doing compared to the strategy, the planning, the thinking, the handling of employees, the working with customers, the deal negotiations, the contracts. There's just so many things that goes on in the business world.
100%. So I think that the sort of the key point there is the doing. If you got the doing part down, that's like half the battle, though, because a lot of people, there's a lot of people, I'm sure you guys have the same, they actually have no idea what they're doing, even on the tech side of things. They're just like, I have a great idea, I can sell this. Like, you know what I mean? They go in and they try to do it just because they think they have an idea to make money, right? Actually, I find the people that actually know what they're talking about to actually be easy, because the business side is got principles to work around it, and you can educate them onto that. But it's really hard to educate a person who has no idea. Like, a person wants to start a mechanic business and they have no idea about cars or tires or that at all, and they want to start a mechanic business because they think it's they find a gap in the market. That's harder to do them, because I can show them all the business stuff. What it really comes down to in the end, like, you need to have a good product or service, and if you don't know what a good product or service is, then it's hard for a business to get off the ground. Like, you can do all the, and I'm sure people say it's like, you can do all the sales techniques and all the business la-di-da in the world, but if you have a shitty product and you don't know what you're talking about, when you go and consult with a client, you could razzle them with all the fancy words and stuff, and lots of financial advisors do that, I'm sure, but they have no idea what they're talking about. In the end, you're not going to keep a client, you're not going to grow a business. So I think that's the first step, is if you're going to do something, if you do know what you're talking about, that's like half the battle. The other part is to understand that it is a very different beast. You have to sort of put the two sort of two hats on, if that makes sense. You need to have your doing mode, but then you need to think of your business, and you need to think of it outside of yourself. A lot of people think of them as the business, but you need to think about, like, if I was going to have this business without me, how would I get a staff member to do this? What sort of leaders do I want? What's the leadership doctrine that I want to have around that? What systems do I need to put in place to make sure that when I'm not doing it, I want to have that the quality is still going to be there? And how do I make sure that those things are being accounted for? Like, all of those parts, you have to teach a business owner and go through them if they want to grow. If they just want to keep it themselves, like a lot of coaches, for example, like we work with a few different coaches, and they don't want to have employees, don't want to have those things. You don't have to learn that stuff, but they're also got to realize that they're not going to have a multi-million-dollar business either. Like, if you're happy to have,
right? It's a job. Maybe it's a well-paid job, but it's not acceptable.
Yeah, taxi meter business. You can only run as long as the meter's running.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You've got to realize that, and that's okay. That's a thing that, again, this is where I don't like having these, like, some people say, you have to exit your business, you have to have this plan. Like, actually, it's really, for me, it's not really true. I think everyone has their own goal in life, where they want to go. And some people have, like, for me, I don't want to work 2 days a week. Like, I want to work, like, lots. Like, you said to me, that's what you should have your ideal lifestyle at. That's not right for me. And someone else might feel the same way, is that they don't want to have the stresses of having employees. They want to have these stresses of having to worry about building this giant business. Like, I think it's like there's a term, like small giants or something like that, where they have, like, businesses that want to make a lot of money. But they are naturally small. They build, like, they actually have these constrained elements around them that have a small business, but it's actually great. And so what you want to do is you want to first look at what your goals are in life. If you decide that you want to be a multi-billionaire, then you have to realize that you have to take on a lot more of this, like, these different areas. You have to learn those different areas, and you have to move outside of your skilled producer sort of point and move into the leadership role, move into the entrepreneurial, look at your business on a finance and look at all the macros. But if you decide that you wanted to start a business and you want to make leather goods and you don't want to have employees, you just want to make leather goods, then you need to look at how to ways that you can maybe start an online course, maybe look at how you can start a podcast, something like that, on leather goods, and then maybe get advertisers to come in there and leverage your skill in that area to then grow onto there without having to become a multi-million-dollar business.
Yeah, but understanding that is probably the gap, right? That is the learning from others. That is the strategy behind it all. And just being a doer and not looking into what other people have done, learning different strategies to market, different ways to actually partner with businesses, and look at how you might leverage other people's networks. If you're not really thinking about that stuff, I feel like you're on that sort of hamster wheel, or you can get stuck there if you don't be conscious of that.
Yeah, 100%. A lot of people think that like, movement is momentum, like forward progress. Like, they think that just by doing stuff is actually what, like, and that's what I think a lot of people, when they are used to being the employee, when they go into business, they can get sort of lost because they haven't got anyone telling them what to do today or what to do tomorrow. And so they just do what comes, like, what's comfortable. Like, they're comfortable doing their craft, so they'll just go back to doing their craft, instead of looking at like the strategy of the business, instead of working in the business, working on the business, if that makes sense. And so I think people need to have,
it gets coined around a lot. It does. And I think, if I were to reflect on working in the business or on the business, I was told that at a young age, and I don't know if I got it. If I look at it now, it's more about just setting some goals and putting some plans in place to where you want to be, painting a picture as to where you want to be in a 3 to 5 years. It doesn't have to be a full business strategy, but that gets you thinking about what I need to be doing today to move me forward, not working on the
Yep.
business, you hear it all the time, but just paint a picture. What do you want to be? And then what are some of the actionable items I could do today, this week, this month that are going to move me towards that? I find that a much easier way to explain working on the business than working in the business, because I find that a little bit vague as to what that actually means.
I agree that some concepts they get simplified to the point of pointlessness, so that they lose all the context around them. Like I totally agree, and it's sometimes hard to get the point across, because people want that catchphrase. They're like, "Oh, I work on business." What does that actually mean, right? Like, "Oh, I'm working on my business." You're like, "What do you mean? I'm talking to my client. Like, that's working on." It's like, no, like thinking about growing. The way I like to look at it, and I talk to my staff about it, is I call it like sharpening the saw. So like, I imagine like there's two sort of wood choppers, right? And say, cut down this tree. One starts going there, starts hacking down the tree. And if you look like halfway through, that person's already gone like a third of the way through, and the other person's sharpening their saw. And you're like, hang on, if you look at that moment, this person seems to have made lots of progress. This person's made none. And then this person, look again, this person's already chopped down the tree and they're having a cup of tea. The person who started chopping down the tree straight away without sharpening their saw is still going, right? And that's what you need to be looking at when you think about things. What's the domino that's going to make everything easier? What should I be working on right now that's going to make everything easier or irrelevant in the future? So if you can start a business, instead of focusing on, I'm just going to like look at selling these different things, how about you look at your business model? How about you look at, are the products you're selling the best in the world? Are you actually passionate about what you're actually doing? A lot of people get caught in the money rut, and they go down this burnout route, and then they end up just throwing the business away anyway, and just throw the handle thing. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to go back working for someone else, because they're too busy like making the movements and chopping down the tree rather than sitting down and actually thinking about what they need to do.
Yeah, automation, processes, and categories, right? Marketing, sales, what can we do to improve? And working on product. I think that's some of the things you described there, and just thinking about them. I think in business we can get a little bit stuck in doing, and it's very easy to do, and we don't give us enough time to just think. So yeah, just anyone out there that's sort of jumping and starting or in business, give yourself time to think, just thinking time, and that would be a Keith Cunningham thing from his book Road Less Stupid, where he basically gives himself half an hour a week or something along those lines, just to think about big questions and big challenges, and just free write and just explore those. So we need to be doing these things as business owners to create new things and come up with new ideas. If we don't give ourselves the headspace, we're never going to create really anything new or innovative. I heard something the other day where for us to get into creative mindset, we need to give ourselves 30 minutes of clear space, clear time, at least, at a minimum. If you're not giving yourself that time, at least a minimum of 30 minutes just to think and be away from maybe some screens or some other things and distractions, you're not going to be capable of creating new ideas or creating something innovative.
Yeah, you need to have that time. There's like manager versus creator time. So manager time is generally like everyone's calling you, you're on this thing. Creator time, you need to separate those bigger blocks. I would even argue 30 minutes is not even close to enough. I think I need more, like 2 to 3 hours. But anyway, at least, right? Like the way I like to manage things, I actually do it on like a weekly basis. So I'll actually give myself at least half a day to work on something, and just so I'm not stressed, and I can really think through something like really, really importantly. Like even with our strategic meetings, we don't split them into like half an hour blocks every week. We sit down at the start of a month, and we might have an entire day just dedicated to strategic planning. We need to get more done in there than the same amount of time split into smaller chunks along the way.
Yeah, because you're not jumping from one category to another, and you're not in the headspace from a client conversation that you just brought into this meeting. So it all impacts, right? So I think there's plenty to think about there. Let's dig into growth and a bit more around some of the key metrics. Now, you wanted to share a little bit around a growth formula a little bit today. So let's talk a bit about that and what that might mean to someone that's looking to grow out their business and maybe really expand that revenue or that profit at the end of the day.
Yep. So what I wanted to share is a growth equation. So what it really is just a mathematical formula on how to grow a business. And what it does is it shows you the variables you need to be focusing on. A lot of times, like we just discussed about people in business doing movement without actually knowing what they're doing. A lot of people want to grow their business, but they don't really know how or what to focus on. And they end up just, say, focusing on one or two different areas. Like they might focus on getting more customers or selling more product to their current customers. But what I want to really explain to people and show people is you want to look at business holistically, because what it does is it has like this sort of compounding effect that if you get more customers coming through the door, and if you have then if you look at increasing your conversion rates, then you're going to get an overall better result. And then if you focus on how do you make more money out of your current customers, and then you have more leads coming through, it has this sort of effect where like the parts are in the whole isn't bigger than the parts that it's made of. If that makes sense.
No, it does. I think, the go-to is always, I need more leads or I need more, increase my, what people are spending with me. I think that's probably the go-to that most people look at. Leads is always the first thing. Market to get leads. That's what you hear mostly in business.
Yeah, definitely. We find that a lot of times people come to us and they're like, the first thing they want to do is like, hey, I need to market my product. I need to market my service. I want to get more people to buy it. And what they're really saying is like, look, I want to make more money right now. And so more people coming through the door, I want to sell to. And it's really, a lot of times we find anyway, that's actually really the wrong end to start. You want to look at converting people. Like I really want to look at like, okay, what's your product and what's your business model to start with? Like, is it sustainable? A lot of people sell products that actually aren't even profitable. We actually find that a lot, especially online. People don't count for a lot of things, and they find that, oh, I'm making lots of money, but they mistake profit for revenue. And it's a big difference that people need to work out. But if someone come to us, like, it seriously is.
Yeah.
But some people don't understand that. Like they think they've got lots of money coming in. Yeah, they think they've got lots of money coming in, but they don't actually.
Yeah. Yeah, and then at tax time, you can be losing quite a bit of money to GST, and people just count that money in the bank. And it's, I've been there. When starting out, there's all this money in the bank. And then, here comes a nice tax bill. Oh, money's gone. And you make no profit, and you're thinking, what the hell happened? And I've got money in the bank. So it's interesting.
Definitely. So when you're thinking about growth, and on a profit standpoint, I want to make that super clear. Is this simply for growing your profit? There are big differences between profit and cash flow. And I think this is another conversation that we can have around the differences between those two things, because people look at the end of the year and like, I've made 100 grand, so I should have 100 grand in the bank account. So they're not even in the same world. So there's really 7 areas you can look at when you're looking at growing a business. So there's your leads and inquiries. So obviously that we talked about marketing. Then your conversions. So how many of those leads and inquiries are you converting? And then your retention rate. So when you convert customers and they become customers of your business, how often are they actually staying? Are people just coming to your business, buying once and being like, I'm never coming back there again, leaving? Or are they actually staying in the business? And then you want to look at like your transaction value. So when a customer comes to you, how much are they actually spending with you and buying? And then your transactions per year. So when someone purchases from you, how often are they coming back in a year? Are they coming back once? They're probably going to do once a year and never coming back again. Or are they coming back 3, 4, 5 times a year? And then you want to look at like reducing down your overheads and costs. That looks at like cost of goods sold and then your expenses. So bringing down, like maybe you want to bring manufacturing in-house rather than buying online, or you want to look at how to increase the efficiencies and automations within your business to lower those expenses. So they're really like the 7 areas that people need to focus through. And the growth equation, what it does is it brings those areas all together into like nice little format that we put together that leads down into profit, and how each one, like affecting each one of those areas, can have the impact on your profit margin for your business.
So from those 7 areas, if you could only do one, would you say a business should focus on more the retention or conversion, or the reducing costs through operations? Because those two would help without having to increase anything else.
Yeah, so it's a hard question because it depends on the business, right? Like if you're starting off and you've got no customers, who gives a shit about retention? You're retaining zero,
Yep.
right? So it doesn't like that's not relevant. But it really depends on what type of business you have. If you say have a really high ticket item and you're selling, like let's just use coaching because we use that before, or consulting. Say you've got like 10 clients and you're making 100 grand from each a year. You probably want to focus on retention more than conversion. But if you're a online store that's selling clothing, right, you might want to look at converting more than your retention rate, because you probably have a higher sort of overall customer base that you could pull from, and you would probably focus on that. But the point I want to get across with this is that you're focusing on one area individually. Like you can't do everything at once, but to look at business holistically and not focus on one thing. Like for example, a mistake that I see a lot of people make is certain businesses focus on transaction value, right? They want it when you walk through the door, you get it. There's an example that comes to mind is a certain telephone company. Won't mention names. Every time I bloody go in there, I want to get a phone, and they sell me $3,000 of shit that I never needed. And what happens is at the end of that, I get buyer's remorse, right? I'm like, I don't need any of this stuff. Like they just told me all this stuff, and I end up getting a bad taste in my mouth after I went there. And so what that does is, they've increased their transaction value, but I definitely haven't increased their retention rate, and I'm definitely not going in there multiple times a year, because I know every time I walk through the door, if I want to get my phone like screen fixed or something, they're going to try to sell me a new bloody tablet they've got, and I don't want that. So that's where looking at these things in isolation can cause issues, because you're not looking at business holistically. You're trying to focus on one metric, but the real metric you're focusing on is how much profit is my business making, and those things add up.
Yep.
So
it's everything combines and multiplies each other, like compounding.
So when someone's
exactly right.
looking at this and trying to get a bit of a grip in terms of what they could be doing in business, like we said earlier, they might just look at leads straight away. You mentioned a couple of key things, but looking at it holistically. So how would someone start looking at it holistically? I think what we don't measure, we can't fix, or can't even have no awareness on. So I think measuring is probably the first thing I would say would be the first part to start. Getting a grip on where you are would be where you need to really begin the process.
Yeah, I think the measurement part is hard. So when we go through this generally, especially with small businesses, measurement of these areas can be really difficult because, it's not difficult, they aren't doing it. So it can be hard to get the accurate numbers. So I would say measurement, if you're starting off, measurement is your first objective. You want to make sure that you're measuring each one of these areas and they're filled out into a proper KPI like statement, because you want to see where, like, when you're starting off, it's easier to set the systems up in place that you can measure them. But if a business is, and most businesses aren't measuring these areas, the best thing to do is just to guesstimate. You've got nothing else to go on. But what you want to do is work backwards from known numbers. So let's say you know your revenue. You should know your revenue. If you don't know your revenue, you really need to talk to someone. If you should,
that's a big problem.
Let's just assume that your P&L statement is somewhat accurate. Then you should work back from your revenue, right? So you should have an idea on, like, okay, how many customers come into my business on a daily basis? How many customers, then extrapolate out, like, how many customers come back on a monthly basis? And how likely is it that someone's going to come back twice a month? And think about that. Just use your own intuition and knowing your business. And then think, okay, I think I get like 200 customers a month, and then times that by 12 and say, okay, I get 2,400 customers a year on average. And then chain with the leads. I think I get around like 5,000 leads a year. And again, leads is actually one thing I want to touch on, because people get confused around this. They think leads are like every interaction that someone has with their business. So they go on social media and they go to their interaction, like, engagement figure, and any person that's ever liked their post or something like that, they put as a lead, and that's honestly that's really stupid. So you want to think of leads are actually people that are wanting to engage with business. Someone going to your website I would consider at the base rate as a lead. But anyone that's isn't visiting your website and just like liking your stuff on Facebook, I probably wouldn't count that as a lead. So I'd count your, like, people that are going to your website and actually wanting to learn more about you, people that are messaging you, emailing you, and calling you, they're obviously leads. So that's just something I want to touch on, because I've noticed that when we've gone through with some people, they're like, how many leads do you get? And, like, we get 3 million a year. I'm like, wow, that's a lot. And they go, like, look at our engagement rate through our things. We have, like, so many likes. I'm like, no. Like, just because someone likes your cat photo doesn't mean they want your business. So you just got to be aware of that.
That's brilliant. Yeah, that's good for anyone that's counting those online. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So what you want to do is you when you guesstimate those numbers and just fill them in the best you can, and then see if your number that pops out in the growth equation is the same as your number, the real number on your P&L. And if it's not, then just adjust from there. If it's too high, then just adjust some of your numbers down where you feel like it is. I find a lot of people overestimate when they do this rather than underestimate. So they end up going there like, what's your retention rate? It's like, 96%. I'm like, really? 96%? Like, yeah. I'm like, no one's moved town or died. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, that's a really high retention rate for a local store in the middle of a small town. So I think people when they go through and do this sort of thing, they can really shock them into what the actual numbers are. And then again, like measurement after you've got the guesstimates and you've sort of worked it out, then you need to add those measurement systems in there. And that really, like, if you think about it overall, to measure each one of these areas, you're only a really good, if you're running a retail store, most modern day point of sale systems should be measuring most of these things, if not all of them, and everything else you can get from your accounting system. If you're running like a service-based business, you should have a good CRM system. Again, that should be measuring these things. When a lead comes in, you should be measuring. That should instantly come in, and you should have that person recorded and measured against there. The same for how often they're transacting. These things need to be measured in a systems way. You really don't want to be relying on your like 16 an hour like holiday staff member to be writing down notes, do you know what I mean, of who come in and who they were and what they were after. This needs to be systematized into the business going forward. But if you're beginning, you can guesstimate and get a good idea.
So if we're talking to, obviously our audience is more of a technical audience, sitting in maybe some SaaS products or application-based stuff. In the online space, there's definitely different applications they can give you. Who's coming to your website? How many contacts you're gathering from your email? You could count those, and that could be systemized. How many phone calls you're getting can be systemized and counted. There's definitely ways you can do that automatically if you think about it and actually put some effort into it.
Yeah, it's just prioritizing. Like a lot of people, because they don't understand why they need to measure these numbers, and that's where the problems come in, is because they don't prioritize this thing. They just say like, I don't have time to measure my numbers. I have to answer this client call. But it's in the end, this is really about doing those extra things, right? This is looking at your business holistic. You can't think about like a map, right? You can't know if you want to create a plan forward. You need to know two things. You need to know where you currently are and where you're going. And the problem is people, like, they want to travel to, they want Tasmania as a destination. They think they're in Hawaii, but they're actually in Texas, right? And they create the plan doesn't come right. You need to know these numbers, because you might go through this, and we find this with some customers. We go through this and they find, they've got fantastic leads. Like they think they want to do marketing, but their marketing's fantastic. Then they're converting actually quite well. The problem is retention. But they think their retention's great, and they think they need to work on marketing. It's by knowing these numbers where you can actually then prioritize where you need to find those sort of low-hanging fruits and the things that where all the money's leaking out of.
Yeah, that's the hole in the bucket. Where is it? And it could be different in every business, right? So being aware of that, like you said, and everyone just jumps to marketing and new sales or new business. That's 90% of the time what people do. They always look at new, but it could be, like you said, just a retention thing. Increase that by 10%. That can make a big difference to a business.
Huge. And it's focusing on, like, I think that there's people get confused and they want to sell products. They want to sell things, and they focus a lot. I spend a lot of time on how to work out their sales system instead of just making the product good. Like if you've got a great product, I mean like an absolutely fantastic world-class product, it's really not that hard to sell. Someone's like, hey, I've got this problem. You're like, I can solve it, and I can solve it better than anyone else on the planet, and I can solve it for cheaper or more efficiently than anyone else on the planet. The sales marketing thing is like, yeah, sure, I'll buy that. Do you know what I mean? Like it's not. It doesn't have. You don't have to manipulate them in some way or go through some transcendental thing. Like, right?
And like, just talking about that though, some people can get lost and just work on a product and not understand the aspects of business. You can still build the best product, but if you don't know how to market it and sell it, it doesn't really matter either. So you still need to be aware of these things and how you're doing holistic. This. So yeah, I get it. Yep. So work on a great product, that's all well and good, but if you don't know how to sell, market, retain customers, because even if you've got a great product, you still need to be servicing those customers to retain them. So there's different things you need to think about.
The best products actually rarely win. Sometimes it's the people with the best marketing that have like a really okay product that have the great marketing, but then they end up getting, what happens is they are good for a little while, then they get overtaken by someone who can do both. And that's what you really want to focus on, is doing both those things. You want to have like, I got a fantastic product, and then I also have fantastic marketing on the side of things. Again, this is where like, it's kind of like the hammer. Like if you're a hammer, every problem's a nail. If you're a developer, right, everything's about developing the best tech. If you're a marketer, everything's about getting more sales. If you're a website guy, you're like, oh, it's all about my SEO and make sure I'm top page of Google. Like, it's not really about all those things. It's about like looking at the business as one. Yeah, it's like a living organism, right? Like if you're like, I've got a great heart, but your liver's dead. Like you're still going to be in hospital. Like you need to make sure that your entire business is healthy, and then work on those areas that really aren't, to bring that up to the next level.
No, it's important. I think it gives a bit of an understanding. What you said there is, generally people walk into business, they're good at one thing, or two if they've got a couple of founders, or the founders could be exactly the same, and that's a big issue too. You want to have people that get different skill sets, but anyway, we won't go there. So, and then they'll focus on that.
Even agencies though. But even agencies, this is one thing that I found when, like, this is one of the things I wanted to really do with change with Kohler, is that I was going through my business journey. I would hire a person to redo my website, and or I'd hire a marketing agency, or hire a consultant. And I found, like, I went to the website agency person, they're like, I want you to help me grow my business. And they're like, awesome. What you need to do is you need to work on your keywords and getting your metadata right, so your SEO is fantastic, get top page of Google. And then when I went to the marketing people, like, all you need to do is focus on marketing and getting more clients through the door. And then I went to the consultant, and all they want to do is show me how to do this fandangle sales cycle thing that I can, like, take my clients through, building rapport with them and going through and like looking at, like, highlighting their issues and all this other stuff. And what I really needed is to make sure that I need to make sure my business model was right. I need to make sure, like, I found out when I actually dug into it that I thought I was making like 30% per sales, ended up making like 3 to 7% on a sale if you accounted for the time it took for my staff member. Because, like, this is the thing, you don't count, right? So when you sell a product, like this is for one of our we were selling for one of our businesses was a rural store, so we were selling like horse feed and things like that, and so it was generally like a margin like 30%. But what I wasn't counting for was that I had to pay someone to go and pick it up to bring it in. I wasn't accounting for like the $3 per bag of freight that I was paying for it. Went through all these type things. It turns out that on a bag of dog food or horse feed, I was only making like $1.50, $1.75 each bag, and I thought I was making like $7.
It's a very big difference, isn't it, to the bottom line? Yeah, wow.
It is.
Okay.
Exactly. And what I didn't need to do was work out how to sell more dog food at that point. Like, I needed to work out how I can increase the not even the overall transaction value, but how much money I was making per transaction.
If you double that number that you're making per transaction, you double the end profit in the end. Pretty quickly. And that might mean certain ways you do things. It might mean the person picks up the freight once a week instead of every day. It might be something different that you do that just changes that. So, and it's a completely different solution, like you said. Okay.
Yeah, it could be introducing different products. So when someone buys a bag of dog feed, or it could be turning them onto premium products, right? Rather than turning them onto something with a higher margin, or selling them like a dog collar or things like that have a higher gross margin overall with that person, that doesn't force something down their throat. It's something that they like. They wanted that. It's going to add value to that person's life in some way, and we're just simply letting them know that, hey, we've got this if you want it, and we'll cut 10% off it if you buy it with a bag of dog food. It's very simple. Yeah,
no, it makes a lot of sense. So treating a business holistically is my takeaway from this conversation, and measuring everything so you can actually report on where you're at and find the gaps and find those sort of leaking holes in the bucket. So if you're and obviously, let's talk about where people can get a look at the growth formula. We'll share it out with the podcast clearly. If they want to find out about it, where can they get it? Where can they download it if they're just listening in?
Yep, definitely. If they go to our website, they can find a link to it there. I'm not 100% sure the URL, but you should find it in the description of this video. We'll make sure that it gets put in there, and they can go to the link where they can download it. And hopefully soon we'll have the growth equation on our website where people can actively go in there and put their own numbers in and see how these small changes can make. Because, like, if even just a 5-10% change in each one of these areas can actually double your business's profit. It doesn't seem real until people try it, until people actually go through their own numbers and see it. But you can literally double your business with just by like a few percentage in each area by having that compounding effect on.
Yeah, I've gone through this myself, and then it's like, it seems simple. So yeah, it is good to look at, and it's good to get an understanding of, because yeah, when you sort of start out, how do I get more revenue? That's always a question a business asks. But really, the question you should be asking is, how do I increase profit first, and then how do I scale that? And increasing profit is not just about marketing and selling a product. There's a lot more to that.
There's a big difference too. I want to cut. Yeah, it is. Once you understand it, you get you kind of get it, and you can think about business in a different way. But what I wanted to cut on is that profit is not cash either. This isn't the big area that I find is profit is obviously incredibly important to your business, but profit does not mean you'll have that cash in the bank. We find this when we work with business owners. They're like, I want to increase my profit. I want to do this. And this is a mistake that I made when I first got into business, is I just focused on profit, right? I want to increase my profit to. So what I did is I went out and bulk bought, because I could get 20% off by buying pretty much all of my stock for the year in like 1 month. I went out and did that, and I thought, this is fantastic. I'm going to make so much more money. And it had negative effects on cash flow, right? So these are some of the things you've got to also count.
You got to manage that
sometimes
too.
it's better
if you're in that sort of business.
Yeah, right.
So most of our listeners, I don't think will be buying bulk of anything. I don't imagine, listening from a tech perspective. But they might go and buy bulk servers and basically the impact of that being cash flow, right? You're just going to be understanding what that is.
But it could also be in your
cash is always king in the end.
Especially in your industry though. In working things, some people might go like, hey, I want you to buy 10 years of my product and get like 50% off, right? And they do that, and then they run out of cash 5 years in because they spent that all on stupid shit, and they bought a boat, and now they have to service their servers. Right?
I've seen some interesting models. Like I've seen models out there, exact thing, 3-year licensing to one product. I think, how the hell are you surviving at year 2 and year 3 if you're not just selling all the time? Because then it becomes you're always selling, and you're and the challenge with that is, you're going to spend money based on what you sold in year 1. If year 2 and 3 aren't the same, you're going to be in a bit of trouble at some point. So, yeah, you have to be conscious of the model. I think that's important. Fair point there.
100%. Yeah.
No, very good, Zach. Well, it's been a pleasure, man, talking about business growth and some things we can look at and some key categories that people can dig into. That's not just about marketing, so and getting leads. So thanks for joining us, and really appreciate you coming on Dev Ready podcast talking about business growth, something a little bit different for our listeners out there. But it's important. We need to dig in. We need to understand we are in business. If you're going to jumping in and building a product, you are in a business. If you are looking to build tech that's going to serve your business and help you scale out, you're going to be building it for some of these reasons around maybe reducing the cost of doing business, or increasing customer retention is why you might want to build a product and add value to your customers. So thanks for joining us, Zach. Really appreciate your time and coming on the podcast.
Thanks,
I really appreciate it. If anyone has any questions or anything, just feel free to let us know or comment in this video, and I can answer anything that everyone has.
So if anyone plays with your calculator, let us know what a small change means to your business, what it ends up being percentage-wise overall.
Yeah, definitely. Sounds good.
I'd love to see it. And if you need any help with it, let us know.
Cheers, Zach. Appreciate it, man.
Cool. Thanks, Zach.
Awesome. Thank you.